Hi, everybody. Hi, Autumn Lynn.
Hello.
How's everyone today? Hey, Chris. Looking good.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Samaya. Good to have you here.
Hi, thanks. It's 7 a.m. here. Sorry if I don't attend the meetings often.
Lacey, are you planning on taking notes directly in the agenda? And can I help you with that?
I will take a few notes, but I think we're going to record it. So feel free to add to it, but I'm mostly going to rely on the recording for people to go check stuff out, because I think there's going to be more than we can keep up with today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice to see everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started because we've got a jam-packed schedule this morning, and just want to say thanks everyone for joining. I think it's been at least 3, maybe 4 months since we all saw each other together, so nice to check in the new year. And we have a lot of great speakers today, with Ali Anderson from the Shorebird Science and Conservation Collective, and Roland Kays from North Carolina State University. And we're also gonna share, Jared and I are gonna share just a highlight reel from the year in animal tracking at Smithsonian when we start off. So should be a fun meeting. And I wanted to just start off with a last minute addition to our agenda, who is Kate Kogi she's the Einstein Fellow at the Air and Space Museum. And she's been working with Jared and I and Conservation Commons, Working Land and Seascapes groups on developing curriculum for middle school students around the science of animal tracking and habitat connectivity, and a bunch of other really great topics that are going to highlight the science that is being done at Smithsonian and try to help connect kind of the future generation with conservation opportunities. And she's based in Charlottesville, and the program is based in Charlottesville. So we're getting ready to kick that off soon, next week, I think. So she wanted to just introduce herself, and because she may be reaching out to many of you along the way in the next few weeks, to invite you to participate in this effort if she hasn't reached out to you already. So Kate, please feel free to say something.
Thanks, Lacey. And I see a few familiar names and faces in here. So thank you to you folks already who I've already reached out to and started some work with. It's awesome. But hi, everyone. My name is Kate Kogi. As Lacey said, I am the Einstein Fellow working with the Air and Space Museum this year. But conservation is, one of my passions when working with students. And so I reached out a couple months back to Earth Optimism, and the folks there have been really fabulous in brainstorming and coming up with some ideas. I'll put the link in the chat. This is just the project we're going to be working on with the school in Charlottesville. It's called the Ophthalmologist Project. Feel free to browse, but you might hear from me in the next couple weeks, months, just regarding some of the work you're doing. I'm going to be working primarily with middle school students on initiatives within the Smithsonian around animal conservation. It's something that those students are really passionate about, and something that I think could be a great start to something that the Smithsonian continues with public education programs in the future. So just wanted to put a face to a name that might show up in your inbox at some point in the near future. And certainly if you have any interest in participating with students, really we're interested, like what we want to learn about is how do you approach animal conservation through the work you do? We're really trying to find multiple avenues for understanding this work and giving students a variety of perspectives and inspiration to develop art around the work you do. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll put my email in the chat as well. But Lacey, I appreciate you taking the time to add me to this great list of things that are coming up in this meeting today. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Kate. Yeah, it's been already a lot of fun working with you, and really looking forward to seeing this thing come to life.
Yeah, website looks fantastic, Kate.
Thank you so much. It's been
Yeah,
fun.
I love the name. I was like, I told you, I was like, how has this not been taken already? It's brilliant. So,
Well, thanks.
It's perfect.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all. Yeah, and have a fabulous morning meeting.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, feel free to stay. I know you've got lots going on, but you're always welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Okay, and then next, Ruth, are you here? I think I saw you.
She's here. Yep.
Okay, great. So I know many of you have probably received the news about the phase out of Conservation Commons, and I just wanted to invite Ruth, our fearless leader in that effort, to say a few words about that. And yeah, Ruth, feel free to take it away. Oh, I'm gonna unmute you. Oh, there we go. Oh, I might have just muted you. Sorry.
I've been muted. I haven't been canceled. I've been muted. Anyway, well, it's great to see you all. Just the sheer number of people from different places, both inside and outside the Smithsonian, is such a testament to you all as a community, and to all of us as a community. So I really don't, I don't have a lot to say other than that, I have to give out my thanks to all of you for the incredible work and time and energy you all have put into building this incredible network, and to building science plans for what you want to achieve. And I have every belief that you're going to still achieve all the things that you have said you want to do. As an entity within the Smithsonian, I can't speak to what the pathway is, other than that I think that the community itself is the proof of the pudding, and that you all just need to keep press on. And so that is really all I have to say. I think we're still waiting to hear how the Undersecretary plans to incorporate movement of life and working land and seascapes into her new plan for the institution. We haven't yet seen exactly how she's going to do that, but many of you are going to be there to see it. So, and also I have spent my entire career jealous of all of you researchers, and kept wondering if ever I had a chance to do my own research project, what would it be? And I've very fortunately been working on a memoir in the last year, and have happened upon an area of study that really needs to be done. So I'm going off to do some research and work on a book on the history of forestry in the United States around 1900, but also comparing it to the conservation movement of now, because that really was the big outward visible sign of going from gloom and doom to, trying to make change in the world. And so it's so exciting now to be looking back at that, and also looking at all of you and what is happening now, and sort of, I'm going to just immerse myself for 6 months at Duke and Yale and a couple of other archives to work on this. but it's all of your inspiration that has propelled me to do this at age 65. So I'm really excited, but I'm also excited for all of you because I think you have formed such incredible bonds and have such good plans that they will survive in whatever the structure is to come.
Can I ask
Thank
a
you. Go ahead,
Sure.
Cole.
Ruth, so you are going to be, I thought you're going to be a research fellow with us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I am
with
going
optimism, and
Thank
then
you,
you're going to
Cole.
start the Duke thing.
That's right.
Just
That's
say
right.
you're not
am.
leaving.
Oh, yeah. I
Like,
meant to say.
I have to keep
yes.
reminding you of this.
Yeah, no, well, because I'm going to be a research associate with the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, but also with the Forest History Society down at Duke. And so, but I've kept a lifeline with the Smithsonian so that I have access to researchers and resources to work on this project. I'm also, yes, absolutely. The Folklife Festival is featuring this summer Earth Optimism, which features some of the stories that you all are working on. So the team that is, was that as of this Friday anyway, will be past tense. The Conservation Commons team is turning into the Earth Optimism team temporarily. So Cole and a number of people are going to be working on that. So if anybody has questions about that, please talk to Lacey because she's been keeping informed about what everybody's doing.
Thank you, Ruth. And, you've left a strong legacy of optimism and creativity that is going to live on through this group. And we're looking forward to seeing kind of what the next iteration of all of your efforts is going to look like here. And appreciate your words of encouragement.
Well, what a nice thing to say, Lacey. You're really the rock star in all this. You've really done an incredible job. Everybody is, I've actually been talking to individuals in the last few days, and everybody points back to both you and Molly as the people who really bring people together and, do all the things the researchers don't have time to do. And you put so much creativity on your work, and you're just a delightful presence. So I wish you so much luck.
Thank you, Ruth. All right, does anyone else have announcements to share before we launch into presentations?
Do we want to mention the new staff changes first, Lacey?
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Do you want to go for it?
Yeah, sure. We have a couple new members of the team. We have our second East African intern, Cindy Obath, who I don't believe is here with us right now due to the time change, but Cindy is going to be working with us to help organize Folklife Festival this coming summer, end of June to July, which is going to be a spotlight. Part of the spotlight will be on Kenya and the greater Mara ecosystem. And then she's also working with us on some species distribution model with an eye towards potentially going to get an advanced degree. We also have Zuzana Holubova, who's with us. Zuzana is a Fulbright scholar. She's also, I think, probably the first person in nearly 2 years that has been able to come to SCBI in person. So it's quite a feat to be able to do so. But Zuzana is working on Corrigum and Western Hartebeest and Park W in Benin. So very threatened populations of ungulates in that part of the world. So welcome to Zuzana. And then third, I also see that Meredith Van Acker is able to join us. And Meredith, I think now you're got your PhD or are in the process of doing so. So congratulations to Meredith, Columbia University, former student, and then is moving on to working with myself and James Hassel in the Global Health Program. So great to have both of you here with us.
Thank you, Jared. I'm really excited to hear about all the amazing projects that the Movement of Life does, and I'm excited to hopefully get to work with some of you.
Does anyone else have new staff or departing staff to share or introduce?
I'll introduce one of our Shorebird Collective team members. You'll hear from Allie in a few moments, Allie Anderson. So she'll give you her background, but also on the call is Candace Stenzel, who is our regional conservation specialist for the Shorebird Collective. So welcome to Candace.
Wonderful. Yeah, great to have you here.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Glad to be here.
Hi. I also, Joe, do you want to talk about Danielle Glass? I don't know whether she's here, but the intern that's working on Asian elephants in Sumatra.
Yeah, so I don't see that she's on the call, but yeah, another remote intern, a data set on Sumatran elephants and trying to do the distribution advised by Peter and myself. So it's a nice global collaboration. Anybody else have any staff coming or going you'd like to mention? Sometimes it's hard to keep track.
I know. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, then should we get started with the celebration? Feel free to get your drinks, your morning tea out. Good. All right. So Jared and I are going to kind of tag team this, but you guys have contributed highlights from the previous year from your programs, and we purposely kind of forced you to pick only a very, the very few, just because there are so many of us and our work is so extensive. So in order to make it digestible, this is by no means comprehensive. It's really just the tip of the iceberg of all the great work that you guys have been doing. And we will, if you see this and feel like you would like, there was something that wasn't included, you want to have included, we are planning to send this up to leadership, so to share sort of the highlights of the last year. So if there are things you'd like to contribute after you see this, please get in touch with me and we'll be sure that they get added in at that point. So thank you to everyone for your help putting this together.
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty impressive body of accomplishments over a one-year period.
Yes, Cole, I will send to you as well. All right. Does that look okay?
Great, yeah.
Okay. All right. 1 second, let me get set up here. Okay. So I wanted to start this off with an area of growth that is both physical and structural, I guess, with the Migratory Bird Center's new Shorebird Science and Conservation Collective, with that brought in over $1 million to fund this new collaborative initiative that's aimed at integrating disparate shorebird tracking data sets into a shared resource for conservation and management. And they've already collected thousands of shorebird movement paths from over 50 organizations and already contributing data to multiple conservation projects. So we're going to hear more about this from Allie later in the meeting. So we'll look forward to that. Jared Staubach also collaborated with an international team to launch the global initiative to map ungulate migrations. That was featured in Science this year and also has a large online presence to help share migratory movement data and help tell the story of migratory ungulates and the importance of their conservation efforts. Matt Ogburn and Kim Ritchie are continuing to grow the Atlantic Cooperative Telemetry Network to more than 150 members in 86 projects. And a big part of this effort is a collaborative database that now contains over 9 million tagged animal detections, and it's really helped to facilitate data sharing across acoustic telemetry tagging networks. Which interestingly to me, I didn't know, but yeah, used to and maybe still is a little bit done via email. So this is a huge step forward and advancing many programs at once that Matt and Kim are leading. The Great Plains Science Team has been very busy in Montana, trapping and translocating almost 50 swift fox as part of a reintroduction program to Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. And they've also published a paper in collaboration with 4 tribal communities and multiple other organizations that review bison restoration efforts and provide actionable items to increase conservation success. They've also been busy despite the pandemic, tagging many bison. So they've almost tagged 100 bison and plans to double that by next week, which is going to be amazing. Jared, I'll let you take over from here.
Cool. Yeah. Really, I wanted to acknowledge Catherine Mertes and the Oryx reintroduction team. So starting in 2016, we're now at over 300 free-ranging oryx in the Wadi Rime Wadi Achim Faunal Reserve in central Chad. This includes now 65 addax. So it's been expanded not just to scimitar horned oryx, but to addax as well. And we have actually very high survival rate among calves. So it's really a huge conservation achievement. And Catherine is also one of the few people that I know that has been able to travel internationally since the pandemic, and traveling to Chad is never easy to do. So congratulations to this team. 2 discoveries and innovations. We wanted to highlight Amy Scarpignato and the work that she's been doing with black crowned night herons, unraveling this 100-year-old mystery. And also Rosana Moraes in Brazil, working with colleagues, implanting heart rate monitors in 7 Maine wolves to track heart rate, body temperature, and activity, and are now pushing on activities to actually reintroduce some of these animals into the wild. So I think it's a really promising step from what we were doing on campus to now actually doing it in country.
And I just wanted to add one interesting note from Amy's study is that this question about the black crowned night herons was originally posed by Smithsonian scientist Paul Barch in 1902 and is credited with initiating the first scientific and systematic bird banding study in North America. So Amy's carrying on a really impressive legacy with that project.
Yeah, 3 other things to highlight.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Where
Sure.
do they winter? I guess I should know this.
Autumn Lynn. Do you want to share?
I think
Is Amy on here?
I
Okay,
am
yeah.
here. Hi, how you
Oh, good.
doing? Well, they do have a mixed strategy. A few birds stayed local over the winter. Some birds wintered in North Carolina, mostly in Florida and in Cuba.
And Amy, maybe drop the Side Door podcast into the link. There's a really cool podcast.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say, if we're just going to highlight the bullets, but if you wanted to fill in the details about any of these things, please raise your hand and speak up. It would be really helpful to provide some of the context. But other discoveries and innovations include work that Michael Brown and myself and the Giraffe Conservation Foundation are working on novel techniques for tracking giraffe. We've been following this for a number of years. Giraffe have been tried to be tracked by a number of different methods: head harnesses, leg bands, shoulder harnesses. Another thing really worked very well We also tried these ossicone mounts, which you can see here, but more recently we're moving towards tags to be attached to their tails and also to their ears, which seem to be actually working very well and working for a longer period and less invasively than these ossicone mounts. Want to highlight Chris Fleming. So Chris co-authored a manuscript that was published in Methods in Ecology and Evolution earlier this year. This paper has been read over 1,700 times, at least by the statistics we can see on ResearchGate, which is pretty phenomenal over a 1-year period. So, you know, very high impact journal article, which I guess we expect this now from all the work that Chris is doing and really drawing attention to quantitative analyses. And then Lacey and I, and most especially Lacey, to be honest, have really been pushing on collaborations with Microsoft AI for Good and developing an open source algorithm to automatically locate and count livestock, so large mammals, in high resolution satellite imagery. So we think that there's huge promise for being able to detect mammals about the size of a cow, bison, elephant, just from satellite imagery. And it's important from our side because as a US government institution, we actually are able to task and collect satellite imagery for free. So we're really able to push on the development of these, the frontier for our ability to count and detect large mammal species. Two discoveries from the migratory bird team. Maybe I might even just let you guys talk about them, but Nathan Cooper synthesizing a paper using MODIS tracking data. For those of you that have used MODIS tracking data, it's very messy data. So representing 9 species across North America. And then Autumn Lin co-authoring using Argo solar tags to track how seabirds are connecting across different continents. So pretty extensive movements. Autumn Lin or Nathan, anything you want to add to that about your research?
Nate, are you here?
I think so.
I am, but I'm doing dad duty right at the moment. So
okay.
Yeah, I'll just the cool thing we found, I guess, is that despite, you know, tracking a bunch of different species over different seasons from different locations, basically almost all the individuals left really synchronously, sort of departed their breeding and wintering sites really synchronously right after civil dust within about a 90-minute period. So something that's been kind of hypothesized to be the pattern for a long time, but not been previously demonstrated.
Thanks, Nate. And I dropped a press release or a research brief into the chat. This study with collaborators in Canada to track all 3 species of North American yegers. They're a kleptoparasitic and predatory seabird. It's the first time Pomeranian yegers have been tracked for their full annual cycle. So that was pretty exciting to bird nerds, really seeing their nomadic movements across a large swath of Russia and the ocean. And all 3 species nested at the same site, but then dispersed across 4 different oceans, the Arctic, Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian, all from the same nest site in the high Arctic. And we created an outreach comic to go with this research. Yegers are often used as target practice in the Arctic. So we're hoping that the comic will help folks appreciate these birds a little more. And all of the translated versions of the comic can be downloaded for free on the link that I put in the chat.
Yeah, and we're gonna include links for all these things when we pass it around. So if you guys miss it in the chat, it'll be in the presentation after too.
Yeah, and our next slide actually fits in perfectly with what Autumn Lin talks about, showing actually these comics, which are pretty awesome to look at. And obviously with the goal of trying to reach local people about this fantastic research. So I think it fits in perfectly with some of the objectives of the Migratory Bird Center. So yeah, congratulations, Autumn Lin. This is really, really cool stuff.
Thanks, Jared.
Also back to Chris Fleming again. One of things that Chris often does is teaching workshops. So another workshop at the Wildlife Society this past year, over 100 registered participants. Those of you that have led some of these online virtual workshops, these aren't really things that are easy to do. So congratulations for Chris to continue pushing and expanding outreach on the tools that you're developing. Just some other outreach and capacity building. One of the pieces from VWL, Virginia Working Landscapes, is that Amy and team were able to secure funding to support PhD research fellowship for Bernadette Wrigley at GMU. So, obviously having funding to continue this project is super important. We mentioned some of the interns that we have brought on this past year in our own unit, but also really wanted to highlight that we, for the first time, have 2 East Africans. I mentioned Cindy, but we also had Majaliwa Masolele, who worked with us for quite a long time on some of the oryx data, and now has secured a position at the University of Glasgow. So I saw that Tom Morrison is here with us today. So psyched to have a representative from Glasgow, and hope everything's going well in chilly Glasgow for Majaliwa. And then lastly, I also wanted to highlight a paper that Ramiro Crego led on, essentially it's a new tool for extracting environmental covariates from precipitation to NDVI to regional burning using Google Earth Engine. So really speeding up the process of linking those 2 data sets together. That also is a publication that kind of lit up the Movement of Life Twitterverse for a while too. It attracted a lot of attention. Some awards. We had former postdoctoral researcher Chuck Bangley, who received the Most Outstanding Paper Award from the Journal of Marine and Coastal Fisheries. And then Chris Fleming and Justin Calabrese received the Wildlife Society Spatial Ecology and Telemetry Working Group Award for their efforts with CTMM. Some of the media coverage, Autumn, Lynn, and Amy mentioned some of these side door podcasts, and we have, and the next slide will show those specifically. But our work on wildebeest, Lacey and I's, was highlighted in National Geographic. We've had media coverage in the BBC, by the Canadian Broadcasting System. Lacey's work was highlighted in Disney's Plus. We were hoping that she would be able to sit alongside Will Smith, but it's a really super, really nice episode on, how animals communicate, how they move across landscapes. So invite you to look at that. If you want to see the one that focuses on Lacey's research, it's episode 3.
Also Tom and Grant's research.
Yeah.
Primarily. And Colin Torney at Glasgow.
At PBS Science, Michael Brown was featured on the Possibilists, which is a tough term to say a few times in a row. But these side door podcasts, if you haven't seen those, really interesting. We've had 4 podcasts just in this year alone. We had the Hot Bird Summer, which features the Migratory Bird Center, Holding Out for Herring, which features Cirque and Matt Ogburn, Make Way for Elephants, which highlights Peter Leingruber, and we're even featured in the Best of the Rest, so featuring Mel Songer and myself about the oryx reintroduction. So congratulations to all this, this attention that our research is receiving.
Thanks, Jared. I'll bring us home with our new tracking initiatives and a look towards the future. So this year, actually, I was also amazed to see how many new initiatives were started. Again, despite the pandemic and remote working, everyone kept charging on. So the Great Plains Science Program and Migratory Bird Center installed 2 MODIS towers in Montana to track imperiled grassland songbirds. Joe Klowski and colleagues launched the first high-resolution GPS tracking study of American kestrels, and that's happening right around Front Royal. Virginia Working Landscapes launched the first GPS Argos satellite tagging study on eastern meadowlarks, and this is an eastern meadowlark here in this beautiful photo. The Acre Lab launched the first effort in tracking endangered juvenile wood turtles to better understand survival and habitat needs. They also partnered with the Department of Energy in Nevada to track the movements of Mojave Desert tortoises. Matt Ogburn and Jimena and Martin Benavides in Peru has started a new collaboration to tag diamond stingrays in Peru, and those first tags are out. This is a photo from that effort. And Hector Guzman quietly tagged the first blue whales in the Galapagos. So I don't know if that's something many people have heard about, but it's amazing. And well, there is a little bit of press coverage about it, but there should be more. So that is very exciting. Joe Klowski will be tracking male and female kestrels to fill a critical knowledge gap about where and how far males travel. Matt Ogburn and University, this is looking ahead to this year really. Matt Ogburn and University of New Hampshire are launching a NOAA-funded project to apply acoustic telemetry data to fisheries management in Chesapeake Bay. So, another demonstration of kind of a goal of Movement of Life is really applying tracking data to inform conservation of mobile species. And there will be a new postdoc starting at CERC and another postdoc starting at New Hampshire on that same project. So a great collaboration there. Matt is also beginning a new project tagging anadromous alewife in Chesapeake Bay. And Matt, did you want to say anything else about any of these initiatives?
Yeah, I'll just mention really briefly the new alewife tagging project. So we've been working on this species and a few others that migrate into Chesapeake Bay from the ocean each year to spawn in the spring. And you can actually see them if you go to the National Zoo, the bridge at the bottom of the zoo that goes across to the SCBI facility there. Maybe on a warm day in April, if you want to try and catch them coming in to spawn. But there's really nothing known about where they go in the ocean. So we're excited to be able to start this project to learn more about how they're using habitat when they're in Chesapeake Bay and in rivers actually spawning, but then trying to figure out where they go. We think they go somewhere off of Cape Cod. So I'll tell you in a year what we find out.
Thanks, Matt. Migratory Bird Center has secured $100,000 to expand the meadowlark tagging study across North America. Nate, Nate, I'll have you say this in just a minute. Good, thank you. The plans are to construct 6 new MODIS towers and deploy 100 more tags. So this is also, something that we've talked about doing for a while, and it's really exciting to see it happening and happening so quickly. So building out the MODIS network will really connect Smithsonian to an international network of researchers, and also give us more information about migratory bird movements. Jared and I are developing a new tracking initiative with Brett Jesmer at Virginia Tech to study bobcat movements and habitat connectivity in Central Virginia. And this is an outgrowth of our participation with the Virginia Safe Wildlife Corridors Collaborative. So we're hopeful that this will be kind of a good example of what is possible to learn from animal tracking data with in terms of informing the design of wildlife corridors, especially in light of the transportation and infrastructure funding bill passing at the federal level, and having quite a bit of money designated for connectivity research and connectivity mitigation. So that's actually something I'll pass around after this. There's a great slideshow that we got at the Corridor Collaborative meeting from Renee Callahan at ARC Solutions, and it outlines all of the upcoming funding opportunities for connectivity research or corridor research. So I'll pass that around after the meeting. And as Kate mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we are working on a middle school curriculum designed around the Bobcat study and just corridors and connectivity in general. So that should be exciting. Oh, okay. Sorry, Nate, I see your note. So I'll just read this. There's another future direction that Nate Cooper wants to add, tracking and translocating merlins in Michigans to protect piping plovers. I actually didn't even know about this. So thanks for sharing. There's a link in the chat and we'll be sure to add that into the slides to pass around. Does anyone else have things they want to add to this? Another cool bullet from 2021. Yes, thanks, Autumn. The Rockwell Museum presentation. I should have added this in. So Autumn Lynn put a link in here where Autumn Lynn and Matt and Jared were interviewed by Martin Collins at the Air and Space Museum about their projects, but it was all through the lens of art and science. And so it was in collaboration with an artist at UC Santa Barbara, Mark Hirsch, who transformed their tracking data into interactive digital art piece. So really cool conversation from that, and a link to, you can watch that whole talk online.
Oh, you can? Oh, that's
yes.
awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's the link Autumn Lynn just shared, and we'll also add that into this slideshow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lucy, I just had one other quick thing to add that I forgot to send you.
Sure.
Because I don't have anything that I can show you, but Chuck Bangley's research on shark migrations is featured in a temporary exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History in New York right now, but they won't allow us to show any of the images of that. But if you happen to be up there, you may see Chuck and some of his shark research exhibited there as well.
Thanks, Matt. All right. So with that, Jared and I and the Movement of Life leadership team really wanted to just say a thank you for all of your hard work this year. You know, in light of, despite many challenges, you guys have managed to, I think, basically like pull off a record-breaking year. So many great discoveries and conservation initiatives, and I'm just so grateful to be part of this team with you all. So,
as the new-ish person, kind of, I'm blown away by this. Like, I want to talk to all of you. Like, I am so pumped right now. So just give yourselves a pat on the back. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. And thank you for your help in making a lot of this happen too along the way.
Let's hope we can make more of it happen.
I also have a quick comment. In light of these, this little bit of unclarity of the future where these initiatives are sitting, I think it's critical to give this information to all of the unit leaders. So I think it should be shared with Brandy and Will and Tuck and, whoever, all the units, not just, up the undersecretary's office. It's really, I think it's mind blowing when you think about how much as a group we're already out there and doing, and how critical it is to bring it all together in a program like this.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So, I mean, part of that is making sure that you guys can help us communicate this information. So, if we left anything out, please communicate with Lacey and I so that we can include it and we can get it onto the desks of other people across the Smithsonian.
May I insert something there? Because I
Mhm.
it's wonderful. Thank you, Peter, for saying that. And this is spectacular. I would also encourage you to emphasize the community aspect of this. Because, bureaucrats, with all respect to any bureaucrats that are on this call, tend to break things down and say that they are all achieved in these boxes, like where somebody lives in their unit or program. And so, kind of honing in on what the aspects, that distilling into what is it about the community that makes these kinds of things more possible and more likely to happen that you couldn't do when you were just on your own.
That's a good point. Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and let's see. Allie, are you? Yes, I see you. You're here. Are you ready? Feeling ready to go?
Yeah. Can you?
Okay, great. Okay? Yeah, we can hear you. And so this is Allie Anderson. She's the new quantitative ecologist with the Shorebird Science and Conservation Collective. And she has an impressive background that she's going to share a little bit about with us, and then also talk some more about the kind of her future directions with the collective. So take it away, Allie.
Awesome. Can you see my screen okay here?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, hello everybody. Very excited to talk with you today. That was very inspiring to see all of those studies that have come about in the last year. So that's really awesome. Today, as Lacey mentioned, I'll talk about some of my previous research before joining on with the Shorebird Conservation Collective and what I've been working on now. Perhaps get some ideas from you for some areas that we're looking to improve with the current process we've got going on with the data management with the Shorebird Collective. So I'll get started here on some of my previous work. So to date, most of my research has focused on understanding the small movements of small flying animals. So that includes small raptors like American kestrels, shorebirds, especially sandpipers and plovers. And then more recent work I have been doing with some small bat species. And my work generally, like many of you, occurs at the interface between the movements of small mammals or small animals and changing environments. So whether that's small environments, changing weather conditions, how animals respond to that, or larger things such as more climate change related issues. So how shorebirds respond to drought conditions at coastal stopover sites, how raptors respond to changing winter conditions, and then how animals might respond to different threats in the environment. So I've spent a bunch of time also working with wildlife collisions at wind turbines. And as many of you know, tracking small animals can have some challenges. And so through my work, I have used a variety of tools, including some more traditional methods like surveys on the ground monitoring, mark recapture of animals, automated radio telemetry, and then more advanced computation methods that often come with tracking animals. So just a quick look at some of these methods. I had a hard time coming up with a title for this slide because I was thinking, I don't want to call these traditional methods. I went with tried and true, but I don't know if that's the best. Anyways, so some of my work with tracking animals and their movements has been more of these standard approaches, maybe we could say. So that's reciting marked individuals, and that most of my work with that has been on shorebirds and small raptors, specifically American kestrels. I did my master's degree on the migration, partial migration of American kestrels in southwestern Idaho with Julie Heath's lab at Boise State. And at the time, we did not have small enough trackers to monitor the migration movements. So we did a lot of work to catch and individually mark kestrels and follow their movements through surveying efforts, both in the winter and spring, to examine how differences in migration affect the nesting phenology and then the genetics of kestrels in the region. But other work that I've done with shorebirds also has used recite methods, which can be really important. Of course, I've participated in many of these on the ground survey methods. My PhD work was on shorebird stopover ecology and movements up in the Canadian subarctic at a site called James Bay, which is at the lower part of the Hudson Bay. And we monitored movements of shorebirds through that project, both with on the ground surveys and other methods, including helicopter surveys of the coastline and radio telemetry, which I'll get into in a second. So most of my work tracking animals prior to the Shorebird Collective has been with small tracking devices, particularly through the Modus Wildlife Tracking System. So this was mentioned earlier, and there are some researchers who are familiar with this system, but it's an automated radio telemetry system where an animal is fit with a radio transmitter, and then it must fly by a stationary system to be detected. That system records the location of the tower that the animal was detected off of, as well as time stamp and signal strength sort of responses. And as Jared mentioned earlier, these data can be quite messy. The methods to analyze these are getting better, but generally, at least when I started, you would receive millions of detections with raw timestamps and locations of towers. And so for my work, we had tagged over 6 species of shorebirds up here up at the southwestern coast of James Bay, so the subarctic. And we were monitoring their movements both outside of that region, within the region, and then in some cases down to South America. So one really exciting thing that we saw was white rump sandpipers, these tiny shorebirds that are a little bit bigger than a sparrow, making direct flights to South America. And we even had some detections down in Argentina. So some really exciting, just anecdotal observations, but we were looking to gain a wide variety of type of information, which I'll get to in a second. So this is semi-palmated sandpiper, one of the species that we monitored up in this region. And you can see the little antenna of a nanotag, a Modus tag sticking off the back of this sandpiper. So some of the key things that we found with our tracking data up at James Bay were a variety of things, but one was that these different species that we tagged were really using the site in different ways, which in retrospect is not a shock, but it can be really hard when we have hundreds of thousands of shorebirds at a particular site, and we don't have many of them marked to get a sense of even how long individuals are staying, because they may leave in batches, but new birds may arrive. So we really were able to disentangle some of these different patterns. So for example, a semi-palmated plover, this small plover that you can see here, really we found use the site not very frequently, this stopover site. So in low numbers, they'd only stay for about a week, and they'd head out, they'd depart on southbound migration, and would make a lot of stops after leaving, in contrast to other species like a white rump sandpiper, which I talked about previously, that really optimizes on this site, will stay up to 3 weeks, can sometimes double its body weight in that time, will pack on fat, and then most of the time make a nonstop flight from the subarctic down to South America. So we really were able to get better information on these really small species that we weren't able to track previously because transmitters were too heavy. So MODIS tags are one of the only tracking devices that we have been able to apply to these species. They also have the advantage of being less expensive than other trackers and don't require recapture of the bird, which has been an issue for other devices like geolocators. So we found that the fatness of the bird really made a difference, which again is not a surprise because these birds need to pack on weight so that they can migrate thousands of kilometers in a single night. But we found some really subtle differences as well. So in relation to timing, birds that we saw arrive at the stopover site early, if they were fat, they would stick around for several weeks, just fat hanging out. Whereas if it was later in the season, they would depart earlier. So we found a sort of threshold of fat effects. We also saw that birds that were fatter, we were less likely to detect in some of these southern MODIS stations, so south of the boreal forest really. And so that suggests to us that the skinnier birds may not be making it either may not make it to departure or may not make it on their migrations across the boreal forest. We compared these data to weather conditions as well. The nice thing about the MODIS data is these tags, it can be nice and it can be a challenge. The tags often go off every 5 to 6 seconds, sometimes 10 seconds. And so you can get very accurate times of departure, which Nathan mentioned about his songbird work as well, same with shorebirds. And so you can really link those to very fine scale weather conditions. And so we were able to see the birds optimize their departure decisions with these favorable southbound winds. But we also saw that juveniles were not always the best at making these decisions. So adults would not depart on nights with rain, but we would see that juveniles would at times. So a variety of information here. Other more basic information that we didn't have about these small birds were things like stopover duration in general, which can be really important for estimating population size. So the total number of birds using the region, because there's thousands of them, but they come in batches, as I mentioned earlier. So if we know that there are thousands, but they stay a long time, we can adjust population estimates. And that's something that the Canadian Wildlife Service is using these type of data for. Other interesting things that we were able to use the telemetry data for were to see how shorebirds responded in how their migrations differed in 2 different years. So we had one season that corresponded with a moderate drought up at this coastal site. And this is quite interesting just in general from my perspective as a shorebird biologist, because drought has usually been considered a problem primarily in internal sites. So interior sites where there's shorebirds may be relying on small pools of water or small wetlands. Droughts can really affect the water levels there, but it's generally has been in the shorebird community thought not to be much of a problem at coastal sites. And so we were able to compare stopover duration and where shorebirds went after they departed James Bay during these 2 different years. And we found in the drier years that juveniles were staying a shorter period of time up at the subarctic stopover site. And then for most species and age classes, we did see that they were making extra stopovers in that dry year. So maybe the site up in the subarctic wasn't great, but then they made additional changes in the following year. So a lot of information can be gained from these data. It's a different type of data. So obviously some constraints as well. In addition to work with shorebirds, I've done some of this MODIS work with bats through my postdoc research. I worked with a professor at Trent University who studied movements of these bats, and part of my work was to help set up 12 MODIS towers and arrange these towers so they could be optimized to track tiny bats as they move during their non-breeding season, or actually during their breeding season. They're a bit different than birds. So their swarming season, when they're flying around to meet other bats for mating. So that's something that I worked on, which was quite exciting, and helped to mentor a variety of students in their data analysis for MODIS as well. And a bigger part of my postdoc research was looking at how small bats and birds are responding to wind turbines, specifically how heights of turbines are influencing fatalities of different species. And so through this work, I did a large amount of work analyzing and contributing to a database of post-construction monitoring fatalities of birds and bats in Canada. So that data, all these post-construction monitoring data are stored by Birds Canada, who was a major partner through this project. And I analyzed these data through a new system called GenEst, where we looked at species-specific fatalities and compared them to wind turbines of different heights, because turbines are becoming larger to optimize and increase energy production. And just a neat note of one cool thing we did there, part of my job was to get these data in a format that could be used through this new program called GenEst, which is a lot more advanced than some of these earlier mortality estimators. And so one thing I was able to do, and it was pretty fun, was to apply a economic type model, data mining approach called market basket analysis, to simulate search schedules. So this program requires data in a certain format for when people were searching for carcasses at wind turbines. And we were able to apply this kind of economic model to get the data in a format that we needed for earlier monitoring efforts that weren't reported in a way that was required by this model. So that was pretty fun. And we also compared fatalities specifically of bats to turbine heights, as well as fatalities of swallows of different species to turbine heights, because there's greater knowledge of what swallows of different species, what altitudes they fly at, in contrast to bats. And so we wanted to see if we could use clues from what swallows were doing and their fatality numbers at different heights to see if we could learn more about bat flight altitudes, because little is known about bat flight altitudes in North America. So that was something I was working on as well. So just to switch forward, that took longer than I thought. So I'll go a bit quickly through the Shorebird Collective information. So through that previous work, I gained a lot of interest in data analysis and coding, and this was something I found as a strong skill set. So I was really happy to come to work with the Shorebird Science and Conservation Collective to start working on bringing together tracking data from a wide variety of contributors so that we can use those to help inform and guide shorebird conservation efforts. So this is a very exciting project, and it brings together two things I really like, which is data analysis and shorebirds. My work so far is currently focusing on creating and bringing together that central resource and providing analytical support to certain conservation projects. So the work that I'm doing kind of falls into three parts: organizing metadata, so data coming from contributors, what is in that data, and what are the data use restrictions that contributors have specified. So data that is contributed to the Shorebird Collective, people are allowed to say whether they would like their data to remain completely private and only used for exploratory purposes, if they want to be contacted at every type of use, that sort of thing. So managing that, as well as integrating all types of data. The data is coming from a wide variety of sources, so getting those into a constant format and a constant time step for analysis. And then actually in the future, during doing more analyses, getting data into maps for certain conservation-based projects, depending on requests. So just a quick look at the data that we have contributed. So about 52 different partnering groups have contributed data so far from 36 species, 5 types of data. So Argos data, GPS, geolocator, MODIS data, and then flag resites, and over 2,000 individual tags, which about 1,000 of those are MODIS tags, and we also have access to more MODIS data as well. Most of the data is coming through either MoveBank or MODIS, with some people sending us data directly. So the work that I've been doing right now has been working with the data contributions from MoveBank, filtering those in a constant method and getting a data pipeline set up for that. I still have more work to do to automatically truncate detections of tags that have just dropped off. So something we've been finding is that data is coming in many different forms with different types of or levels of pre-filtering. So this is something that we'll need to do because a large proportion of tags people have not indicated whether the tag has dropped off or not. So that's something I'm working on. And this will be expanded to include these other data types. So right now we have a draft internal mapping interface that we're working on as well. So those cleaned and filtered locations that are coming out of the pipeline for MoveBank, we've put those into ArcGIS Online, which is allowing us to kind of zoom in and explore the data. So we essentially want an online mapping system where we can explore the data, and by we, I mean the Shorebird Collective kind of staff. So myself, Candace, Autumn Lynn, and Rick Langto, that we can explore the data depending on different conservation questions that are asked of the collective or goals of the collective, that we can kind of look at and see what we have, keep that data private because there are different use restrictions, but then potentially grab the data that we want for specific applications like mapping. So for example, in the future, we like to be able to select a chunk of data on the map, get information on which data contained in that selection meet certain conditions like data restriction thresholds, calculate summary information for that particular area of the tags, this sort of thing. So this is an interface that we're working on. This would be something I'd be really interested to get other folks' advice or maybe perspective on, simply because we're dealing a large volume of data. So right now I have less than a quarter of the data moving through the pipeline, and we have 100,000 model locations, which has maxed out leaflet viewing through Shiny and R. So we moved to ArcGIS Online. Anyways, data there's a large volume of data that we'll be trying to map and understand, and any tips would really be appreciated. So just before I finish up here, some examples of how these data have been requested or possible uses of the data for conservation purposes. We have had a few requests come in from the community already for needs that these data could be used to help guide different conservation objectives. So for example, there's been a request to make migratory connectivity maps for a government organization for population assessment to see are different species of shorebirds, are there tracking data lining up with current management boundaries and management units essentially. Another request to see if the data contributed to the collective could help inform or find hotspots of locations around the Texas Gulf Coast, which could be used for possible WISRN designation. So WISRN is a reserve network site. So areas are designated as important or not, and help collect different or connect different important shorebird tracking sites or shorebird use sites. And then another kind of more education-based request. So requests for tracking data for Hudsonian godwit, to create a outreach comic that shows their maps and migrations, and that's for a non-government organization in Canada. So anyways, that was a lot of information, but hopefully gives you a better sense of my work, where I've been coming from, and what I'm working on now with the collective, as well as some areas of direction. So happy to hear more. I know I took a little bit longer than anticipated, so we might have to move on, but that's my email, so you can reach out to me if you'd like.
Thank you so much, Allie. That was a really great overview and a fun introduction to you. So thank you for doing that. We do have time, probably, I don't know, 5 minutes for questions.
I just have a quick question, and I might have missed it. Can you share the other organizations that are contributing data, like, you know, like a list of them? I'm just curious because that's important to funders.
Yes, we do have a list up on the Shorebird Collective webpage.
It is. Okay,
Oh,
I'll check
yep,
with them.
Yep, it's up
Cool.
there.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
put it in the chat.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Thanks, Autumn.
So right now, the contributors, most of them are coming from universities, government agencies, and then a smaller subset. Well, I guess the smaller subset says is agencies, but then a lot of nonprofits or non-government organizations as well.
Yeah, I was actually surprised how many nonprofits have tracked shorebirds. You know, I thought most of the data would be coming from agencies and universities, but actually about half are coming from nonprofits. So that's really interesting.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, if you think of them, follow up with Allie and invite her to Zoom lunch. All right. Jared, do you want to introduce Roland?
Yeah, sure, happy to. Roland, thanks for joining us today, first of all. Many of you know Roland, but Roland is a professor at North Carolina State University and the lab head at North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and is also a research associate with STRI, so has a long history with Smithsonian. And he's going to be talking to us and providing us with an update on the Icarus Global Monitoring Initiative, and then also introducing Move apps. So really excited to hear your talk, Roland. Off to you.
Great, thanks. It's great to talk to a group of movement ecologists like this, because I can kind of jump right into it, and probably a little less preamble than I would need with other audiences. Actually, I'm going to start with a different topic because I'm advertising my podcast. I hear you guys are doing podcasts, which is great. I have a podcast called Wild Animals, which is crazy stories about animals told by the people who study them. And it's a lot of animal trackers, mostly, who are telling the stories. And I was like, well, here's a bunch of animal trackers. I need 2 more episodes for season 3. And so maybe some of you guys have a good story and are a good storyteller or like telling stories about your work. Each story is about a particular individual animal. So we can talk about the study and we can talk about other animals, but I like to have the narrative of kind of one individual that, you know, as animal trackers, we get to know them personally, really, right? And there's some amazing things that are happening out there. So you can see some of the characters. We had, you know, P22, the mountain lion of Hollywood. We had Bravo Luis, the monkey who became a leader on a rainy day. Hansi, the stork that brought a baby to a farm. So we try to come up with a clever little title to get people hooked up. And it's doing pretty well on the podcast universe, I guess. It's got tens of thousands of listens. So we'll get an audience, and it's a easy, you know, we just get on and have a chat on Zoom and record it and tell the story of the animal. So if you have any ideas, let me know. I just recorded Kilkenny, the red wolf who hatched a hypothesis, and I need 2 more, and then I'll have 10 and can release season 3. So just send me an email if you want to do it, or if you have somebody else that you think would be good who's not here, send me their email and I'll track them down. So I'm going to start talking about MoveBank and Move apps. And we finally this year got around to writing a paper describing MoveBank, which MoveBank's been around since like 2011. And we keep sort of building and adding to it. And we realized it's gotten fairly complicated and does a lot of different things. And a lot of people probably don't keep track of all those different things. So we're like, well, we should probably write a paper. So that came out this year. And I've got with this diagram from there that sort of shows what MoveBank does. So I want to quickly just kind of give you this background. Thanks for the shout out there in the previous talk. MoveBank streams in live data, or you can upload data yourself from legacy data, right? So if you have data from 20 years ago, or you have data that you just downloaded or whatever, you have a file, you can also upload there. We also have a new, we need the metadata, right? Like what animal the tag was on, of course. And we have a new app called Animal Tagger. So you can do that if you're in the field and you're putting this tag on this animal, you can write that down the field, enter the animal's weight and whatever other measurements you have, and that'll sync up. So that's a relatively new app. And then, the important things we always like to emphasize is the data owners, the data providers retain complete control over the data on MoveBank. So you can share it or you can not share it. There is absolutely no requirement to share on MoveBank. I think people think MoveBank has a lot of sharing capabilities, which is great. So people think, oh, I don't want to put my data on MoveBank because I don't want anyone else to see it. That's not a requirement. You completely control that. We just give you the power to do that. So you can download the data. You can let somebody else download the data. You can publish it with a DOI. A lot of journals want you to make the data publicly available. So we can give it a DOI. We can kind of freeze it and say, this is the data set that was used with this paper. And then people can cite your publication whenever they use the data, get a lot of reuse out of data. You can also access the data through an API, which can pull right into R. So if you're, or into other ways that you access APIs, but there is an R script. You can send it to the Animal Tracker app, which is a phone app that you can see the data. And so there's some public data. You can share data on public. We have a lot of people, some great success in Europe where citizen scientists are checking up on storks, and sometimes the storks die and they're able to get there and determine what the cause of death was, even if it's countries away from where it was originally tagged. Sometimes even they've rescued them. Some got sort of tangled up in some fencing, and they were able to actually rescue the stork before it died. So that was kind of cool. Or you can keep it private in Animal Tracker. You can look at private data in Animal Tracker as well. And then we also have the ENVA data system here, which you can annotate environmental data. It's kind of similar to Google Earth Engine. I see Somaya Dodge is on the call here somewhere. She was helped us get this going. It has satellite data, it has weather data. And one of the cool things is it also can interpolate between points in space or time. Because so often, the temporal data might be a week apart, might be a month apart, and it will interpolate between that or spatially as well. But what I really want to talk about is Move Apps, which is our new platform for analysis. Here's just a quick shout out on the ENVA data system, where you have this layer, in this case, it's net primary productivity, and you have your tracking data points, and it will tell you at this place, at this time, that this is what the NDVI was, or the NPP. And then you can also upload simulated data if you want to do like a research selection function, et cetera. Okay, so Move Apps, the idea here is to analyze without code. Obviously, there's code underneath it, but we build these apps. They're these small analysis tools that usually have R running underneath them, and then you can combine those into a workflow. Any programmer can make an app, and workflows and apps are published, citable, and shareable. So I can make a nice workflow, and I can say, hey, check out this workflow, and you can plug in your animals, and you can run it right through. And then you can maybe, I want to change this setting, right? So here's an app, an example of an app: segment data by speed. Anything, the speed in question will be 4 meters per second, and we're going to select the points that are above that. So fast-moving animals, for example. And you can string this into a workflow. So get the data from MoveBank, remove the outliers, thin the data by time. Maybe you only want hourly data and it has some other data. Segment the data by speed, and then create a raster, right? So here's an example of some eagle data on MoveBank. And this is what it looks like when you just plot it in a map. And this is what the raster would look like. So you can see, it really highlights a migratory corridor for these eagles. But you could say, I want that higher resolution, go back to the app, change the setting, run it again, and get a more detailed map. So this is kind of the idea behind Move Apps. Here's another example of the migration mapping with some cool mountain plovers that we tracked with Icarus tags earlier this year, going on with the shorebird. Do they really count as a shorebird? I don't know. Anyway, cool bird with some new tracking data from them. Really pretty incredible migration. Did not expect that. Here's another first passage time analysis on mountain plovers, looking at marking out when they're resting and when they're migrating, and then color coding the points and getting the data, right? Here's a more complicated, so we can get pretty complicated. There's really no limits to the complication. And this all runs on another computer in Germany. So you can get this started, you can get this going, you can close the website and it'll still be running and the result will be there. Or you could be working on a slow internet connection in Peru and get this going and come back and get the results, not clog up your computer. And this one shows, so this is a cluster analysis meant to identify where there's a cluster of points. And in this case, the vulture biologists really want to know where that is right away. And potentially it could identify a carcass of an animal that was poached or of an animal that is otherwise of interest. So you get an output table of these clusters. And you can also have this done, you can schedule it to do it every day. You can get the results via email. And we now have it set up to access via an API as well. So if you want to have some automated retrieval of this, that is also all possible within this framework. So in terms of what we've got, the data upload, mostly coming from MoveBank, but you can also upload data from a cloud storage. We've got a sort of a morning report, which is like, this is something you'd want to see every morning to check where your animals are, whether they're alive, how far they've moved. A variety of data filters, data cleaning, some just minimum convex polygon at the moment, a variety of behavioral analyses, data transformation. So you can output as a shape file, you can output as a text file, you can output as a KML to look at Google Earth, some basic distance stuff, a few, somewhat limited mapping at the moment. There's a lot more we could do, or somebody else could do, right? Anyone can make these apps. We started making apps, but if you're like, I want to make a better mapping app and I'll use it, I'll publish it, other people can use it as well. We do have the MoveViz animation app right here. A little bit about what's coming. We have a new NASA grant to work in partnership with the Yellowstone to Yukon collaboration, and working with John Feeberg, we'll be adding some resource selection functions and connecting with the data, the remote sensing data from NVIDIA. So that'll be coming in the next couple years, well, in the upcoming year and in 2 or 3 years as well. These are some of the partners that we're working with on that, working to meet their tracking needs, but then these tools will be useful for other people as well. Working with the CTMM group, Chris and others will be getting some of their functions in there. They just started that right now. Working with Fish and Wildlife Service on possibly a new app to add in some wind turbine data and do some work related to that. That's not started yet, but that's an idea. And so you guys, a lot of you guys are good programmers already. You might want to contribute an app and make it easier. A lot of you, even if you're good programmers, it might be easier to try out some of these apps than to go write the code yourself. So I'm gonna now abruptly transit to the Icarus project. I think you guys wanted 10 minutes, so I don't know if I might already be over that, but this is what you asked for. But I wanted to tell you about.
You got time rolling if you want. Yeah.
Okay. Can I take a deep breath for a second?
Yeah. You've got the rest of the meeting actually.
So yeah, I wanted to make sure you guys knew about Move Apps because it's pretty new, and I think you might be interested as users and or as programmers. But what you really wanted to hear about was Icarus. And so Icarus is a tracking system with an antenna mounted on the International Space Station. You can see it there. There's some awesome pictures that just came out from NASA. And you can see we're highlighting the antenna. And the idea between Icarus is being a very low power data relay, right? So the Icarus tags on animals can be smaller. They're going to obtain GPS points, but then they're going to send those data back through the Icarus antenna. And the reason this works is two things. One, three things. The technology is newer and better than some of the older systems. The space station's in low Earth orbit, so it takes relatively less energy to get the signal up there. And the other thing is, it's a pretty big antenna. It's hard to know from scale here, But for example, we were just talking with the Swarm constellation of satellites, which is just got purchased by SpaceX, and it's meant to be their low power communication solution. And it's a whole bunch of satellites that are, like they say, they're the size of a grilled cheese sandwich. So their antennas are really small. And when we found out the details of how they work, they require about 10 times more power for the communication than Icarus does. So, by having a relatively big antenna at a relatively low orbit, we're able to have the lowest power sort of space communication that we know of. Who knows what the Army has or whatever. And so, right, the goal is to get smaller tags. This is a paper from a couple of years ago. Tags are getting smaller all the time, tags that have remote readout. And so we're trying to push the envelope with Icarus. And so the way it works is, as the space station flies overhead, the tags know when it's about to come overhead, because they know the orbit schedule. They turn on just for a couple seconds. They're sending data back and forth. We have it goes both ways, so we can reprogram the tags, and then they turn off. So that's how they save power. Here you can see the tags. They're solar powered. They have a small battery. They record not just location, but some other data as well, which can be transmitted back. We can't transmit a lot. We don't have a lot of bandwidth, but we can report some of these data as well. That's just another fancy animation Martin had made. We are working on ear tags as well as another design. So that's something that is not right now. Well, right now, the trick with the ear tags is, right now, Icarus needs a pretty big antenna. And so getting those antennas to survive on animals' ears is challenging. So we're working on some new solutions for that. So hopefully that'll be along before too long. But right now, different animals, it might work better or worse. So that's on the work. Here you can see one of the early blackbirds that got a tag. You can see where it fits on that, releasing the blackbirds. And we have got a lot of great data back, especially over the last year. Here you can see some examples with those mountain plovers up there in red, where we're getting, GPS accuracy data. So really high scale data, depending on the size of the battery, what kind of sunlight it gets, will depend on how many points per day. And we've had a variety of challenges with the tag design. So we've been kind of going safely with 1 point per day, but some of these we could definitely ramp it up. Some of them might have gone faster, but so you can see some of the different examples out there of the tags. But there's also been a lot of challenges with this project going back from the beginning. And one of the problems we've had this year is the data flow has been really inconsistent. It's like all of a sudden we don't have data. What's going on? Oh, there's a film crew on the space station and they turned off all the science instruments. Okay, it comes back again. Okay, good. Then you get data. But then there was a misfire of the booster rockets, and it sent the space station spinning out in space. And guess what? We didn't get data for that time period. And then a couple times in the last year, for some reason, the space station has just done a 180 and it's been flying backwards. And now, we have really precise, we need to know where the antenna is to turn the tags on. So all of a sudden there's like a week period where we didn't get data. And, they don't tell us these kinds of things ahead of time. We just all of a sudden don't get data. And we're like, why? And we check the news. We're like, oh, that's why. So we're working with them to try to get more stable data flow from them. But it is a problem in terms of having, if you're going to start a project and catch a bunch of animals and put tags on those animals and spend that money and that effort and harass the animals with these tags, you want to make sure that you're getting data consistently. And so we do have some agreements in place moving forward that will help some of the problems we've had, but obviously some of this is completely out of our control. So we're also working on future generations. So I'm not sure exactly how long we're sort of guaranteed this antenna. It's for the next couple of years. It'll keep getting extended, but we're looking longer term, talking with NASA about a more dedicated mission on a satellite without a bunch of people that can muck it around, that will allow the continued development of even smaller tags. So the upshot is that a lot of people are like, well, when can we get the tags? And the trick is we can't sell tags that we aren't sure are going to work, because the space station might pull a 180. And so we're we're sort of setting them up as collaborations. And you can pay us to help cover the cost of the things, but in terms of the formal agreement and the way it's done, the lawyers don't want us setting up a sort of formal setup where we're selling these tags. Right now we have 4.3 gram tags, 5 gram tags, and 12 gram tags. And we're working on new generation tags, working to get it below 4 grams and potentially even smaller. We have had some that have worked that are smaller than 4 grams, but then they don't work. And so we want to make sure those are consistent. And so if you're interested in something starting this summer or something later, you can send an email to that group, to that email, and we'll get you on the list and see if we can work something out. We do have some, in particular, we have some funding to track North American birds with these devices. And so if you're working on any of these species, I heard Kestrels mentioned earlier, that's the tag weight percent. I can't remember exactly what weight that is that number's for. But you can get an idea of kind of the range of where we're looking at. Somewhere in this range. We did tag a big robin earlier this year, and that seemed to work pretty well. I should mention the space station doesn't go to the poles. So above about 60 degrees latitude, it's not going to work. We actually tagged the robin in Alaska, and we didn't get any data until it flew south, and then we got the data, including the GPS points from Alaska. So that actually worked. Risky, but it worked for that particular robin. And the other thing we're working on moving forward is another option for super low power getting your data back is using the IoT networks like Sigfox or LoRa. And so this is a local area network, right? That either has to already be there, which there's a lot of Sigfox networks up there, or is something that you set up. But if you do, it's another very low power, very lightweight communication network. We can stream the data right into MoveBank. And what we're looking at in the future for IoT tags would be a combination between some Icarus and IoT together in the tag. So if you're in range of a network, you maybe have a little bit more bandwidth and you can send the data through an IoT network. If your bird gets up and flies away, hopefully it'll be picked up by the satellite. Okay, so that's my last slide. I'll just end on the summaries. Remember, if you've got stories to tell or know someone who wants to tell a good story about a particular individual animal that they studied, I'd love to add it to the Wild Animals podcast. Talked about MoveBank and MoveApps for no-code analyses and Icarus and IoT for smaller, cheaper tags. Thanks.
Thanks, Roland. Appreciate that. I'm sure there's lots of questions from the group. I can open things up. I think it's great to see all this happening all at once. Certainly, I guess from our side, if you're looking for beta testers, we have lots of local projects where we'd be happy to collaborate. Meadowlarks being one of them on our campus here with Amy Johnson.
Yeah, that'd be great. I see that mentioned from Autumn Lynn there as well. Yeah, the best is, I should give you also, let me drop an email into the chat. Ashley Lohr works with us on some of the coordination of Icarus tags distribution. And so you can write her and the that Max Planck Icarus email address. So that's really, let me put that other one in the chat as well. In terms of getting tags, starting in May, the best bet is to send an email to Ashley and to this Icarus Max Planck email address, and we'll figure it out from there in terms of how many we have, where the priorities are, when they're going to be ready, etc. Yeah. How much do Meadowlarks weigh? Oh, they should be doable. That'd be cool.
We're
tagging are 120. Oh, Amy's there.
Sorry. Oh, Amy, you're there too.
I'll let you.
Amy and I work together on the Meadowlark project. And so, yeah, I'll mention MCP is expanding range-wide for Eastern and Western, but right now our permits are allowing anything over 105 grams for birds. So the Icarus tag might be a little too big.
105 grams?
105 grams for the bird's weight, so is 4%. And so that's what we're allowed to. And I think our tags with harnesses now are about 4 grams.
4 grams. Yeah. So we're right. We're like, we were under 4 grams, and then we had to add a little more epoxy to keep it waterproof, and it bumped it up a little bit. So we're at 4.3 at the moment. You know, I mean, the other thing, yeah. So
I still think worth talking to the BBL about.
Yeah, you could ask them for, you know, experimental 5 tags or something like that. You know, we'll see. Maybe it's definitely worth checking. Maybe by May we'll gotten 0.3 grams back off.
Yeah, and especially we have some northern areas where the birds might weigh a bit more, and they could carry the tags. And even at our Virginia site, we could probably have some birds that could carry the tags. So, yep, we'll be in touch, hopefully.
I had a nerdy question about what you mentioned, Roland, about just having the energy to shoot all the data out and recommending 1 position per day for now. And linked also to the challenge of not transmitting north of 60 degrees latitude. Is a researcher able to use one of the handheld units to download data from the tag and get more data than perhaps 1 position a day, or to get the accelerometry data or pressure data? What's the trade-off there? Like, if we have a bird that is site faithful during part of the year, has high fidelity, we think we can get the data from the tag at some point. Is that handheld unit still an option?
Yeah, so we have a limited number of these handheld units that can download the data directly without going through the satellite if you get nearby. And that has the advantage of not the limited, you know, the bandwidth is much higher, so you can get much more data, kind of, you know, clear them off. You could potentially set them at a higher rate. So yeah, that's definitely, yes, we have a limited number of handhelds available.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm hoping, we've had some initial chats about Jaegers up in the Arctic, and I'm hoping that we might be able to deploy some Icarus tags this summer on Jaegers. And I'm interested in some accelerometry and pressure metrics to look at whether we can get a signal from their tracking data of kleptoparasitism versus natural foraging, and maybe disentangle that on their migration route. But
they're plenty big, right? You could use a big.
Oh yeah, they're huge, so they can carry. They're between 260 to lightest up to about 750, 900.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, in terms of, you know, in terms of the limited tags that we'll have in May, we would prioritize a small bird over a big bird. You know, in terms of, like, for the bigger birds, there are other options out there, and so you don't need Icarus to do it.
Yeah, we can keep chatting, but the smallest birds we use a 5 gram tag on. So
okay, yeah. Well, then if that's, I'm not doing the math, but just in general, like, if you ask us for a big bird just because you think they're cheaper or something like that, we'll probably, you might not get it. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions for Roland? Catherine, she raised your hand. Yeah.
Hi, Roland. Good to see you again. I'm mostly working with large ungulates in Central Africa, and we're always looking for lower impact and longer term ways to track animals. It seems like larger animals aren't a priority right now, but in terms of the ear tag potentially being produced and kind of testing how those work as an ear tag on larger animals, would be really interested in test information or testing some tags out in the field.
Yeah. Where are you working?
In Chad and Niger.
Okay.
So well within reception range for the ISS.
Sure.
That long antenna is a big concern.
So we've had a lot of success with the IoT ear tags. So down, like in Kruger National Park, there's Sigfox connection. And I think those animals out in that habitat get such good sunlight that we're getting, like, I think 24 fixes a day, and we can put 1 in each ear. So we end up with half an hour, every half an hour tags data, for as long as the tag will stay in the ear, which is amazing. And that's sending the data back through the Sigfox network. So, I don't know. Yeah, I would check see if there's.
There's no LoRa. There's we can't really put in any infrastructure for a local network. We're mostly working in a really large reserve where there's limited opportunities to put up any kind of base station infrastructure. So mostly interested in the low orbit transmission.
Okay, yeah, I don't know the latest. I've mostly been working with the IoT ear tags in the last 6 months, so I don't know where they're at on the other ones. But I would definitely send an email to those guys, to that email, and see when they might have some to tag out, because I think they put some on the Saiga. I think those were
that's the last I heard.
yeah, and I think those worked out pretty well in terms of the functioning of the tags.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that update. That was great.
Sure.
Meredith, yeah, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, Roland. I'm Meredith. I am starting a postdoc under the Movement of Life and looking to test out some smaller units on passerine birds and bats in Nairobi. So I'm super interested in hearing more about the IoT and Icarus compatibility and kind of how that would work. It sounds like you've done it with the ear tags. Have you tried it with any of the smaller weight backpack tags?
Yeah, we've got IoT tags that are about the same size as the 4-gram Icarus tags, I think.
Okay.
So there's still, I don't know what the limits are for going smaller than that. I haven't heard about trying something smaller than that for passerines. But I think it's a good question. I don't know what the size of the IoT only backpacks are. So in terms of IoT plus Icarus, I think that's a kind of a year away. That's something I think we have funding for now, and we have the company to help do it. But it's going to be probably a year away before those are in production.
Okay, and that would allow for more fixes per day.
Yeah.
Theoretically, okay.
Especially when they're in range of the IoT.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ruth, did you have a question you wanted to ask before? No. Okay. Roland, with your Move apps application, are you planning at the museum to have any courses on, kind of showcasing it and providing some training on how you would build your own app?
Yeah, so we have some online material about building apps, and we probably need to make it better. It's basically it's put the code on GitHub and then connect it up. That's the kind of the basic idea. There's obviously some more steps, and there's some testing. Need to make sure it works. So we have a testing environment where you can set up your app and test it without the whole world using it while you're still testing it. But we're just now having the first couple outside people develop apps, and so we're doing that. And then in terms of I think I'm not going to plan any in-person courses right now because they always just keep getting canceled. But I think we should. I mean, at the minimum, we should start doing some YouTube screen share training. Short sort of training videos to show how it works. As part of this NASA grant, we'll be doing some in-person stuff with our collaborators at the Yellowstone to Yukon area. And so that'll be kind of driving some of our development in terms of like finding out what their needs are, building apps that meet those needs, training them how to use it. That's kind of what our immediate. And so I think as we start doing that, that'll generate some of these YouTube training videos and stuff like that. But I don't know. And then we are gonna do one at the Wildlife Society in the fall. So we do have that on the agenda in terms of an in-person thing.
Yeah, great. Any other questions from our group?
Roland, what's the kind of end or big vision for the Move apps, the end goal for it? Like, do you envision it really being like a one-stop shop for movement analysis? Like, and how, if yes, like how broad would that be?
Yeah, well, so, generally the sort of vision is to just make it easier to get insights out of this tracking data, right? As we get more and more tracking data and it gets more complicated and we get more and more analyses, I mean, there's like 100 different, R packages that do something with movement apps. So how do you keep up with all that? And just to try to, like, by automating that, make it a lot easier to try these things out and to learn from it. I mean, if you look at, and there's all these steps too to make sure you do it right? You can't just, you've got to filter out. You've got to realize there might be outliers. You got to do all these different things that are important. And so we need to build those in to make them legitimate analyses. If you look at the bioinformatics world, right, all the genomics world, they're moving, they have a lot of these kind of automated workflow types of software. And so that was basically, the ambition was to have something like that for ecology that can lower the barrier a little bit in terms of, to get to some insight out of the tracking data. And then also connect some of the people that are developing these apps with the community that's using it and try to sort of bring them together to work to give them a platform to work together. In terms of, the scope, I think we're going to keep it as focused on animal tracking data as the sort of core data type. We're not going to add camera trapping data or, it's got to fit the MoveBank tracking model, data model. So that includes banding data in theory, or, certainly MODIS tower data. Anytime you have relocations of known individuals is basically the type of data. But, what'll be interesting is as we start bringing in other data types, like we're going to be connecting ENVA data to getting all the NASA remote sensing and weather data in the upcoming year. There's this new group that's interested in maybe adding some data about the wind turbines to start sort of adding those analyses. So how exactly that's going to work, we'll have to see. And then the other thing that we're looking at is before too long, we're going to have to offload some of the server expenses to the users for the bigger jobs. Just because we're allowed a certain amount of free stuff where we have it now through the Max Planck, but they're not going to host everybody's analyses forever. So if you're doing bigger stuff, the small stuff will always be free, but if you're doing bigger stuff, probably what we'll do, is just you'll have an Amazon account or whatever, and you'll pay for your own. We can just ship it off to there. We've thought about charging for app use as well, and we could, you could develop a really cool app and charge people $5 a year to use it, and you could get that money, and we would take some cut for hosting it. So that's another thing we've definitely talked about. We haven't implemented it yet, but it's an interesting model.
Yeah.
I have so if this kind of goes back to Lacey's, like the end game and, and monetizing it, like paying for it, because we're, the whole, what everybody keeps telling me is, if we could learn how to layer all of this crap, all this data, all this tracking data, then we can understand and we can devise solutions, right? That's correct. So monetizing does seem like a good idea, but I'm just wondering, is that the end game?
It's not our end game, no.
Okay.
No, any monetization that we did would be only to make the platform more sustainable in the long run. It would be to, pay for development, to pay for maintenance, to pay for upkeep, things like that. Where none of us are maybe that's a problem, right? But we're not Silicon Valley moguls looking to, but also, yeah, we want, we're animal trackers too. We want to save our money to buy tags or travel to the sites or whatever. And so, our goal is definitely conservation. We want to get, and science, we want to get, lower the barriers to getting insight from the tracking data to conservation managers and to scientists that are asking questions, so that, maybe you don't need to wait 5 years for the PhD student to finish their dissertation to understand the implications of the data that you collected yesterday. And we might, in a lot of these conservation cases, we don't have time for that, right? We need to act right away. And we have some users right now in South Africa at the Kruger site, getting data every day and checking on the clusters and realizing there's a wild dog that hasn't moved, and getting there and finding it has a snare and rescuing the wild dog because it had a snare, because they can get this information within, and they're like, hey, 15 minutes isn't enough. We need every minute. So we're upping the scale of some of this. That's kind of an exaggerated case of the time scale. But
that's
a real
helpful.
example.
So Roland, that's really exciting. I think that I can, we need something like this. That's pretty obvious, and I think we need something that's accessible to people that can't necessarily code.
Like me.
How do you deal with the challenges? I mean, things are changing so fast in R and these other. I mean, R to some extent provides this, right? I mean, everyone can access it, but you have to code. But things are happening so fast. How do you keep it really updated? And I'm skeptical of the monetizing, I have to say, because every attempt that I've seen on that, I think Wildlife Insights is struggling. When the US tried to monetize their satellite imagery program, and they're still trying to do it, it's not really working, right? In the end, it comes down to, it's like weather service, right? It's a public service that potentially governments really have to pay for. And for that, it needs to be recognized as a common good, and then maybe it will happen. But obviously, we have to try all these routes right now. I guess my main question right now would be, how do you keep it updated? How do you keep it alive once you have it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the trick with any software, right? That's what, as a biologist who started developing, software and databases, I was like, oh, we'll just build it and use it. And it'll be easy, but no, there's constant maintenance, there's constant upgrades, and always, of course, new features. So, that's something that we'll have to. We have a team on board that's doing that now, that's one of the things I'm kind of curious about is, as obviously sometimes you get R packages that go out of date, right? And so if you have a workflow and one of those R packages, could potentially stop working, I don't know how we're going to deal with that. That might make that workflow. I don't know. Probably someone knows more about R to know whether that's a big problem or not. But in the short term, we have a team that's developing the apps, testing the apps, and the apps are getting updated. Every once in a while, I'll go to a workflow that I haven't been to in a while, and I'll say, "Oh, this app is updated." Press this button to update the app. So we have that mechanism built in to allow them to update. But how sustainable that is over the long run, we'll have to see. As with anything.
Roland, nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Quick question. So maybe you said it, and this was such a riveting talk, I may have missed some fine points, but how many people are using this now? I mean, how many
Move apps
you deal with? Yeah.
Move apps. I didn't tell you that. I don't remember.
Is it thousands?
No, it's hundreds. It's hundreds now. We just talked about this, but I forgot what the exact number was. I think they said from sort of early fall until this month, we doubled our users. From sort of maybe dozens to hundreds, I think is kind of where we're at. Which is a good pace to grow, right? Whenever you start something like this, you don't want to all of a sudden get 1,000 users. I think we can have about 50 concurrent users on the system now before it would start to bog down. I haven't seen it bog down yet, so I don't know what that looks like. But that's about where we're at right now.
Any other questions for either Roland or Allie while we have a minute or two? Okay.
I think it's the longest time that I haven't been up to SCBI in like the last decade. I always had an excuse to come up every once a year, twice a year.
You can come.
I know,
We just have
I
to
know.
go- We have to go through a lot of red tape.
Yeah, Peter,
I think
Peter will
it-
get you through the gate.
No,
You
I
can
don't know.
come when
but
we
I
deploy
think-
Icarus tags on Meadowlarks. How about
Yes.
that?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That would work. That will
Kestrel.
work. That will work.
I want to catch kestrels with Joe. That sounds like fun.
Yeah,
Anything to do
we can find good
outside.
excuses for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, Roland, I'm just about to send off an email to that group about the Kestrel project here. So
Great.
yeah, you'll see that in a second. That would be awesome.
Sweet.
Well, Lacey, any, I guess, parting words from your side?
No, I think I'm good to go. This is a really great meeting. Thank you, Roland and Allie, for sharing your presentations with us. And yeah, we look forward. Hope both of you guys will be back in our next one. We have these quarterly, so I think April will be our next one, but you're on the mailing list now, so you'll hear about it.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I think this was a great meeting. Thanks to both of our speakers. It's really great seeing all the work that all of you are doing, and we're certainly very happy to try to profile it and increase the exposure. So thank you all very, very much, and hope to see you again in 3 months.
Thanks, Lacey and Jared.
Thank you, everyone.
Great job.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.